Mark Twain Selected Works, Chapter 60 of Following the Equator, Part 2, 1897. Only 1 short week later he fell again, and oh, sorrow! Not in a hotel this time, but in an English gentleman's private house, and in Agra, of all places. So he had to go. When I told him, he said patiently, "We're good," and made his parting salute, and went out from us to return no more forever. Dear me, I would rather have lost 100 angels than that one poor lovely devil. What style he used to put on in a swell hotel or in a private house! Snow-white muslin from his chin to his bare feet, a crimson sash embroidered with gold thread around his waist, and on his head a great sea-green turban, like to the turban of the Grand Turk. He was not a liar, but he will become one if he keeps on. He told me once that he used to crack coconuts with his teeth when he was a boy. And when I asked how he got them into his mouth, he said he was upward of 6 feet high at that time and had an unusual mouth. And when I followed him up and asked him what had become of that other foot, he said a house fell on him and he was never able to get his stature back again. Swervings like these from the strict line of fact often beguile a truthful man on until he eventually becomes a liar. His successor was a Mohammedan, Sahadat Muhammad Khan, very dark, very tall, very grave. He went always in flowing masses of white from the top of his big turban down to his bare feet. His voice was low. He glided about in a noiseless way and looked like a ghost. He was competent and satisfactory, but where he was it seemed always Sunday. It was not so in Satan's time. Jaipur is intensely Indian, but it has 2 or 3 features which indicate the presence of European science and European interest in the weal of the common public, such as the liberal water supply, furnished by great works built at the state's expense, good sanitation, resulting in a degree of healthfulness unusually high for India, a noble pleasure garden with privileged days for women, schools for the instruction of native youth in advanced art, both ornamental and utilitarian, and a new and beautiful palace stocked with a museum of extraordinary interest and value. Without the Maharaja's sympathy and purse, these beneficences could not have been created. But he is a man of wide views and large generosities, and all such matters find hospitality with him. We drove often to the city from the Hotel Kaiser-e-Hind, a journey which was always full of interest, both night and day, for that country road was never quiet, never empty, but was always India in motion, always a stream and flood of brown people clothed in smouchings from the rainbow, a tossing and moil and flood, happy, noisy, a charming and satisfying confusion of strange human and strange animal life and equally strange and outlandish vehicles. And the city itself is a curiosity. Any Indian city is that, but this one is not like any other that we saw. It is shut up in a lofty, turreted wall. The main body of it is divided into 6 parts by perfectly straight streets that are more than 100 feet wide. The blocks of houses exhibit a long frontage of the most taking architectural quaintnesses, the straight lines being broken everywhere by pretty little balconies, pillared and highly ornamented, and other cunning and cozy and inviting perches and projections. And many of the fronts are curiously pictured by the brush, and the whole of them have the soft, rich tint of strawberry ice cream. One cannot look down the far stretch of the chief street and persuade himself that these are real houses, and that it is all out of doors. The impression that it is an unreality, a picture, a scene in a theater, is the only one that will take hold. Then there came a great day when this illusion was more pronounced than ever. A rich Hindu had been spending a fortune upon the manufacture of a crowd of idols and accompanying paraphernalia, whose purpose was to illustrate scenes in the life of his especial god or saint, and this fine show was to be brought through the town in processional state at 10 in the morning. As we passed through the great public pleasure garden on our way to the city, we found it crowded with natives. That was one sight. Then there was another. In the midst of the spacious lawn stands the palace which contains the museum, a beautiful construction of stone which shows arched colonnades, one above another, and receding terrace fashion toward the sky. Every one of these terraces, all the way to the top one, was packed and jammed with natives. One must try to imagine those solid masses of splendid color, one above another, up and up, against the blue sky, and the Indian sun turning them all to beds of fire and flame. Later, when we reached the city and glanced down the chief avenue, smoldering in its crushed strawberry tint, those splendid effects were repeated, for every balcony and every fanciful birdcage of a snuggery countersunk in the house fronts, and all the long lines of roofs were crowded with people, and each crowd was an explosion of brilliant color. Then the wide street itself, away down and down and down into the distance, was alive with gorgeously clothed people, not still, but moving, swaying, drifting, eddying, a delirious display of all colors and all shades of color, delicate, lovely, pale, soft, strong, stunning, vivid, brilliant, a sort of storm of sweet pea blossoms passing on the wings of a hurricane. And presently, through this storm of color, came swaying and swinging the majestic elephants, clothed in their Sunday best of gaudinesses, and the long procession of fanciful trucks freighted with their groups of curious and costly images, and then the long rear guard of stately camels, with their picturesque riders. For color and picturesqueness and novelty and outlandishness and sustained interest and fascination, it was the most satisfying show I had ever seen, and I suppose I shall not have the privilege of looking upon its like again.